Confessions of a Star Trek Cruiser. Yes, today on episode 390 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trekland Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47. And yes, the TreklandTreks.com. Oh boy, I'll tell you about this in a minute. Hey, it's glad to be back here on this fine Tuesday. It's been 3 weeks, guys, gals, peeps. Yes, finally, again, for some sanity, clarity, and the bigger picture in all things Star Trek. What an incredible time. People who weren't on the cruise, just as people who aren't at Vegas maybe, or aren't at Comic-Con. The silver lining there is that you get to see the news spinning off. And right now, Star Trek's at a little bit of a low ebb. Maybe that's just as well because there are so many other distractions in the world right now that we need to keep an eye on. But we also need Star Trek for our distraction at times, just for our mental health. And we'll always have the legacy shows. And I don't know, at what point does Discovery and Picard and Lower Decks become legacy shows now? I don't know. There's a question for somebody's poll. But we're going to be a little thin. We've got Strange New Worlds coming up sometime this year. And one of the news stories, in a thin time, one of the news stories in the last week, while I've been gone, I was on the Star Trek cruise for a week. We had some extra days that overlapped last Tuesday. I just wanted to take a break and get back with you here. Same thing with our with our Discord Trekophiles Tonight community space that's new for the Trek Files. If you're not aware of that, you just need to be a Roddenberry Patreon member. It's like the lowest one is $1 a month. So for $12 a year, you can come over and you get access to all the Roddenberry places, the audiences, the shows. But if you want to be finally in a community we're building for the Trek Files, because the Trek Files had no community, it was just the Facebook page, and it was kind of hard to do that there, especially these days. But yes, every other Monday for now at 4 p.m. Pacific, restarting yesterday, we're open for Trekophiles Tonight, spelled with an F. And I invite you to come over there. And again, $1 a month minimum, and you're involved with all the Roddenberry podcasts and all the audiences. And they have a really awesome Discord. They even have parties at Vegas and some of the other big cons. The Patreon community over there. My Patreon folks here at the time were grandfathered in, which was a startup bonus perk of being a Patreon over here. I appreciate everybody going both ways. My point is that we talk about what's going on in the Trek world here, sometimes what's going on in the real world. And it was kind of the slowness of news was punctuated by, I saw a couple of things. Yes, we were in cruise isolation in the cruise tunnel, and I kind of took a backseat from everything else, but occasionally it would pop out. But here's what I saw going on. Number one, those Strange New World posters really grabbed people's attention. I'm trying to tell if that's a motif. Some people saw the Captain Pike on Anson and thought it looked just like his scar that we saw on Sean Kenny in the Menagerie, and then recreated on Anson on that on the episode Discovery where they go to Boreth with the time crystals. Who knew? Always raise your cloned Klingon former emperor where you've got access to time crystals. It makes so much sense. But no, we had that also, and lots of the other thing. My friend Brian Volkweiss, who's the head of Nacelle Company, which you should know from the toys that made us and the movies that made us and the Center Seat, which I was able to take part in a lot of. But amazingly, out of a film and TV media company, he's split off and done action figures and did some other, famous comedians like Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, some really obscure. They're looking at doing action figures for niches that aren't being filled. And lo and behold, he winds up among licenses. He winds up with a license for Star Trek. And they're doing action figures for characters that have never been released before. And they just had that at Toy Fair. The world's buzzing about that too. So we've had some news lately. I mean, I've got my heart set on a Rachel Garrett. The Enterprise C, the ship, the crew, the whole situation. Kind of my unheralded favorite of all the Enterprises. You know how I am about underdogs. So there's that. But mainly the thing that's been in my face for the last couple of weeks has been, yeah, the cruise. Now, whenever I talk about Comic-Con or Trek Vegas, it's always in the guise of, here's what I learned, here's the trends I've seen. Did you see this news coming out of Trek Vegas or New York Comic-Con, whatever? It's always good in comparing notes, but there's nothing like having a little bit of on the scenes, behind the scenes. And for the cruise, maybe to whet your appetite to go someday if you're not a regular. If you're a regular, I know I'll have some regulars in chat today. So everybody share if you want to. Share some perspectives, because there's the thing. There's a whole spectrum of cruisers. There's a spectrum of the guests. There's the actor guests, and then there's the Federation advisors. So they had it very diplomatically and tactfully segregated. A lot of times we were all together. A lot of times we had our different ways. But the overall sense was, if you can get to the cruise, it's awesome. What I thought I'd talk about today, do you like my title? Do you like the title? Was that clickbaity enough for you? You should know better. The things I learned about fandom and myself were incredibly and awesome. And it was and I'm going to just say this, the cruise was amazing. I saw many of our fans and friends. We had Portales there, we had TTLers there, Patreon, and just folks in the chat room here. Portales, it wasn't a live dive technically, but we had a Portal 47 meetup. There were about 8 of us. People that knew. I had Trek Files folks come up. I was trying to share buttons that I never had on me. It was a cruise because we stopped at 3 places in the Caribbean. One I didn't get off. One we just did it was really, they call it the unconventional voyage. So great branding. Good on you, ECP, which is just Entertainment Cruise Partners. They've had this license now this is the 8th one. There were 2 Voyage 2s, like 2A, 2B. Then they pulled back to 1 a year. It's always the same time of year, late February, early March. Usually out of Miami, or at least the Florida East Coast. Next time it's going to be out of Canaveral. One time was out of LA, and I offered Trekland Treks tours to the cruisers who wanted to do it day before and day after, a couple of years ago. So those are kind of like the parameters. The whole ship, I know the good old days, and still going, of the old Sea Treks and Trek Cruise is a partial community aboard a ship. They rent the whole thing. It's Explorer of the Seas. It's Royal Caribbean. Or Caribbean. Is it still called the Caribbean Sea? Okay. Or the Caribbean Sea? All right. Nobody's misnamed it or unnamed it or denamed it or renamed it, right? Okay, good. It was an awesome time. And what's interesting is you think, okay, well, it's about 2,000 people. Vegas, just for comparison, is 5, 8, maybe 10,000 in a crazy year. There's a lot of things that feel the same, but there's so much that is not and could only be on the cruise. There's big shows in the big theater, which is a great theater. It's not a platformed stage. It's a built theater. A smaller theater converted from their ice rink at the right time of year. And some other, the smaller bar venues. There's a lounge. It was awesome where I did a lot of mine. It's just the feel and the vibe is different. And, it's 7 days. It's not, now we're going to be 5 days at Vegas this year. And yes, I'll be back at Vegas for since 2001, when it was a slanted fedora and at the Ranch Motel. And then since 2002, when Creation had it at first the Hilton with the Experience and then the Rio. Every year, gang, in some capacity, sometimes purely press and sometimes with StarTrek.com, old StarTrek.com. And then since about 2008 as little entrepreneurial me in league with different people at times. And as much as you think, okay, well, people go to panels. Well, for one thing, when you're sitting at a panel, sometimes you're in theater seating. Sometimes, like in the lounge, you're in half-round chairs. That part felt like a European convention. The way the European lobby conning at the bars adjacent can feel. And, of course, you're all on the cruise together, and there's a unique bond because the actors, the cast, the guests are all using the same corridors you are. There's some escape points, but everybody's, coming and going. Elevators, the turbo lifts. And there's a really they ask for everybody to, respect everybody's space, but a lot of the actors, it's their first time, they're giddy, sometimes they're tired, sometimes, the guests, and I'm that way. I mean, we all have I've just done, 3 hours of something and I want to go rest for a minute. But it's amazing how closer everybody is, and yet at the same time maintains the boundaries, which says so much for fandom, that's asked of it, and there's rarely any kind of incident, which is amazing. Of course, you have to get yourself there. There's a range of prices. I didn't realize until I was looking at a sheet that the lower, the interior cabins, sure, but you can get there very reasonably. Now you have to get yourself to Florida on your travel too, but they were very reasonable. And getting to be comparable to what a Vegas would be. Of course, that's for all the days. And then you have food packages in your internet and that kind of thing to add to. But my point is that it was more affordable to go if you just want to get there and experience it, and the 7 days. And I know it took a couple of years, but after 8 years, there is just as devoted a cruising fandom as there is the good old Vegas fandom at the Rio, or people who make New York or San Diego Comic-Con or Dragon Con. That's their thing, and power to be to everybody. Good on you if you got your thing and your posse and your system and all your favorite places. That's what it's about. That's what it's all about. But I was the rookie. I was the cruise virgin this year, and there were a lot of people with me. That was always a good conversation starter in my panels. And I started to notice a few things. Number one, again, lots of familiar faces, lots of folks that I knew, lots of folks who knew me. But the good thing, after I processed it, was how many folks I didn't know and how many folks didn't know me. And about the time I was like, and trying to put that in a bucket. Are these east of Mississippi people, of Mississippi River people who I don't get to see live as much, even though we've got the internet now and Zooming and yada yada, and more of the central Midwest and West Coast people that I do know and came from and are much more familiar with? I mean, I'd love to get East Coast. It's not that. And I have been. It's just not, it's like 3 to 1, And no, it turns out that in a lot of spaces, there were just as many both ways. What was interesting was, my fellow Federation advisors, so the great, powerful, awesome, and very devoted to by many of the cruisers, Dr. Erin McDonald, who's a science advisor that I've known since before she was science advisor out here. Muhammad Noor, he had some kind of fever 2 days before he left and couldn't make it. He's fine. He's fine. Had nothing really serious. He just couldn't travel right then. And he was much missed. He and Aaron have become regulars, but this year, Brannon was in with the not the actor guests. John Grunsfeld, who was an 4-time shuttle astronaut, later on a science administrator at NASA in a couple of different positions, worked on the Hubble Science Tech Academy, the institute that processed Hubble image. He was a guest, but and Tom, makeup guru who led a makeup team, my friend Lisa, among them. And Rob Perlman, who's done so many Star Trek books among his many books, who's awesome and has made a specialty of these small bar games that people love to do. And finally getting to see him in the flesh and not just with a Zoom. And so we had non-actor guests. And what I found increasingly was we all had full rooms and it was awesome. But there are a lot of people. It wasn't just me. In fact, at one point we had meet and greets and I was saying how many people got to, so I moderated the welcome, the one that you see the video of, right? All the actors come out on the poop deck or whatever, the observation deck, and fans are lining everywhere you can squeeze in. Probably 90% of the boat is there, and the actors come out one by one. They get introduced as we set sail. And then about 2 or 3 hours later, there's a welcome panel for all the Federation advisors and the science advisors. And I had the honor to introduce myself and all the moderators. And that was pretty full. What's interesting is in a couple of venues later, I found a huge chunk of people, say out of 25 people, 4 not only knew me already, but had even gone to any of the panels from the not the actor guests. So it was really interesting. And of course, some of those situations were people who had paid extra to be there. So it's almost like the more you're spending on your Star Trek on the cruise, the less you're involved in all the world that me and all of our colleagues and guests and everything I've worked on have been a part of. So you might look at that and go, oh, well, you're barking up the wrong tree, Larry. But no, I'm doing it for me. And I'm doing it for, in the old days, those 8 other people that subscribed to Interstat, letter of comment zine. The 30 other people are talking about Spock and Vulcans. Me and my 6 buddies are talking about what we want to talk about. And that's okay. I know there's a lot more than 6, but I had that feeling again on the cruise. And again, this is nothing to say. Everybody pursue your passions, do your thing. But after I was just kind of taken aback, and again, I didn't have to take it personally. It was like the entire backstage and science adjacent arena to Trek. Lest I draw too broad a brush conclusion here, it was fascinating. I just wanted to know more. I just wanted to do more. That was close to the end of the cruise. I wanted to do more experimenting. I cannot complain. We had great idea of the locations panel. I haven't done it in years, but I did with Dr. Aaron, my Trek Stars, Real Stars panel. And we had a lot of fun with that. Got some science out there and had a lot of overlay with Trek fun, which is the point. I hosted the instant meme game with this bunch, and we had some good ones come out of that. And I don't know, maybe what I do, maybe what all of us non-actors did was an acquired taste. Because I have to tell you, if you have not seen some of the videos, some of the stuff, John Delancey had a documentary-ish, but Bob Picardo's opera, an opera accessible for Trek folks, with Trek clips from the Doctor singing in other moments, with his friend, the opera singer, who is a Trek fan, and his wife, and the Klingon opera singer who came out of fandom. It was an amazingly accessible and very smart show, as well as being talented. It was on the big stage. You could take it to a Star Trek convention and give people a taste of opera. You could take it to an opera convention and give people a taste of Star Trek. It's one of those kinds of things. Very smart. A huge applause for Bob Picardo. Very smartly put together, as well as wonderfully performed and all of that. And with a house band that they'd had one rehearsal for the first show. That's the other thing. You have the house band there, orchestra, that you can bring, that's always there, bring aboard. They're playing, but then they also have other musicians that can back up some of these other performances. But I mean, everything. Then John redid his 1990s session of War of the Worlds radio play, the Orson Welles, had probably 20 to 30 of the guests involved in that cast variously, from Kate on down, Kate and Jonathan, and huge crop of folks. They made Professor Pearson, the lead character, made it Professor Pearson for Kate. And she was outstanding, as was Bob Picard at the beginning as the reporter, and Jeff Combs as the disgruntled survivor that she meets later on. Anyway, it was amazing with sound. It was like a radio play performed live on stage the way an audience would have seen it that night. Amazing. But all the live, and of course the fun things. I was lucky I got pulled into Hollywood Squares on about a week's notice. Was the only non-actor playing. I think I held my own with Garrett and Wilson and some of the rest. 2 performances because they have to split the audience up just for sizing. So, a lot of fun stuff, but things that I don't think are on the bill for any land-based convention. Not because of any one thing, but just part of it's just the vibe. But I go back to this thing about the Fed. It was so instructive. It was humbling for a nanosecond. And then I just I want to know more. I want to know more about this demographic. I think I mentioned at times Adam and Benji's podcast, right? The Greatest Generation. The first time I saw their live show on their tour in LA, there were 100, 200 people in line to get in. I knew 2 people. Now, not to say that I should know every Trek fan in the world, but I thought in LA I would know more than 2 people out of 200. And it was amazing. I went, oh my God, you guys have found the secret other half of fandom that is not online and is not at cons, maybe online, maybe the ones who are under an alias. And I had as much a revelation on the cruise. And that was kind of like a final day moment. The rest of the time, it was just getting your bearings and learning directions and what's fore and aft and where that room is and which way do you go. And that takes a few days. By the end of the cruise, you've got that down. But the regular cruisers, and they have the same boat, the same ship every year. The regular cruisers know that thing, just like I know the Rio. And it was amazing. And they're even comparing like the nooks and crannies, and they fixed that this year, and they got that, which is awesome. You can tell who the regulars are. But yeah, a lot of first timers like me, which is always a good conversation starter. It was great to have some sit down conversations in our dining room with a lot of folks I hadn't got to meet before, some that I'd wanted to meet and I didn't have a real chance to. I was so disappointed because on the upside of getting to be a part of the Star Trek Squares, Hollywood Squares game, that meant that I missed almost all of both performances of Tawny and Eugene's improv show, which is amazing. Now, luckily, there was like a 20-minute overlap, and we actually got done on time, and I raced over and got to see the last 20 minutes or so of Tawny and Eugene's improv, which is hysterical. But Denise does kind of an MST3K. She gets, oh my God, she had Ethan and Eugene and Garrett and herself with the sound turned down on Assignment Earth. I learned so much about Assignment Earth with the sound off and them supplying the voices. That's become a regular staple. Acting out another script on stage is another. I had to miss it. But that's another contribution from Denise, who's a regular. There are some of the actors that have become regulars, and people have their small sessions too. It's just a really interesting mix. There's usually at least two things, depending on if you're in port. Port days get thin, and then the evening fills up again. Anyway, I've helped the ECP bunch with a little bit of the marketing. I wrote there were 6 actor trivia rounds, which were awesome. The actors gave trivia with a host. Ashley, who's one of the morale officers in the ECP crew, were awesome. And it was great to write trivia for the 6 of them in various ways. Everybody had their own personality. Jerry Ryan's room, of course, was overflowing. Everybody else's was close to that. It was really interesting in ways. There's just something about you're contained. I mean, sure, you're contained at the Rio, but people head out and go to the Strip, or they go back over to the Gold Coast. But just imagine that nobody walked outside the doors of the Rio for a week. And then you kind of shrink it in a little bit, not claustrophobically, but you just shrink it in a little bit. The unused areas go away. All those extra casinos go away. And there is a casino on the boat that can open when they're in international waters, which is hysterical. And of course and the signage. ECP does such a great job, running the thing. It's a well-oiled machine. And if there's any squeaks along the way, hiccups, it's mostly well contained, or they react to it really quickly. But oh my God, the sign. And I have things I haven't posted yet. It's really, really clever, some of the signage. So yeah, you go through the casino and here's all these Quark quotes up, full panel bits. And almost as amazing, you may hear people talk about this, is ECP does several cruises a year. And right as we came into port, they were taking all the decoration down, all the signage for Star Trek down, and doing their 80s cruise. And a lot of people, some people, you got a deal if you had to get off the boat and then come back on. And by Sunday morning, they were already re-lettering. Or actually, they just pulled off the Star Trek and there was the 80s right underneath it. It was amazing. I have a video that I got to post. I'm glad I finally got a chance to be a guest on the cruise. All the staff is wonderful to work with. It was wonderful to have last minute little bits thrown at me, opportunities to do things. I guess that's a good sign. Hopefully at some point I get to go back again. But they have the gig down pat. It's amazing. And the veteran fans and the veteran guests had such a good time. And it was fun getting to be a first timer with some of the other first timers I talked with. And having a lot of late night places, nooks and crannies, sitting down. Because Tawny and Eugene's, no, it was the Assignment Earth night, the talkback Assignment Earth. And because it was so cramped, I just sit down, and I have to post this. I sit down on the carpet at the top of a stair against a railing because it's so crammed by that time, at starting time. And I realize about 2 minutes in, I'm sitting next to Sean Ferrick. And he turns around and is like, oh, Larry, oh, Sean. And we selfied. But I mean, and not that those kinds of things don't happen, of course, at any convention, Vegas and otherwise. It's funny to have the same 2,000 people and you start seeing people over and over again. And of course, you're in a corridor. They have the door decoration contests, the window decoration. That's a whole other layer that you'd never have unless you had a very homey little fan con in one hotel that still might do this. Otherwise, the door decoration contests and free samples and free gifts that people give each other, it really has, in 8 years, now going on 9, not counting COVID delays, it's really got its own culture. So I don't know how many of you are interested. I don't know how many of you are curious, but don't ever intend to go. I hope I haven't bored anybody this week, but I just thought I would give you a little taste of some of that from my perspective. But most of all, again, I talk here a lot about the different fandoms and how we should not make the mistake of looking online or going to a convention or, knowing your circle of friends at your local club or your Facebook page where you've known each other for 3 or 4 years, right? I try to warn everybody when we had so many dark days online. Try to warn everybody like 6-8 years ago when toxic tubing took over and online just degenerated into this mess before we realized that was happening all up and down the place online with the socials and the algorithms, the negatively attracting algorithms. Try to warn folks that just wherever you are, realize that slice of fandom is going to be different than others. The folks who are online can be anonymous and not have to answer to anything. And sometimes they're totally different stripes. Sometimes they have a different agenda. Sometimes they're just bots and trolls. But people you meet live at a con aren't ever like that. And at the same time, the people you meet live at a con are the people who got themselves there and could afford it, right? What I call armchair fan is the vast majority of everybody out there, many of whom just watch the shows and they don't subscribe to 9 podcasts and want to talk and say they just want to watch the shows and share it with their partner or their uncle or their niece or their kids. And that's armchair fandom. And cruise fandom is, related to convention fandom, but it's even more, I'm still searching for this. It feels even more mainstream in a way and old school in a way. And maybe that's just because I was a firstie and didn't see everything, but I do know that the Hollywood Squares, the Star Trek Squares night happened midway through the week. It was maybe Thursday night. And I do know after those 2 main stage shows, I think a lot more people, and I'm not saying this out of ego, I'm purely being observational and sociological, okay? A lot more people noticed me and made eye contact and smiled. Not that people were unfriendly and not that I was chopped liver. I'm just saying that I think there was a great untapped realm there of folks who had no idea what a lot of us do. I never stopped to even ask about how many folks, do listen to a podcast or do have a streaming show that they enjoy. I kind of think that might have been a low percentage too. Anyway, it's all just fascinating to me and all incredible mix of people. And for the most part, 99.9% of the people well-behaved and taking care of themselves and all that. Some folks, were needed, had accessibility issues and the cruise ship, provided for that. There's no complaints there, but it was. And I want to say the age skewed a little older. You need an income to be able to get to a cruise. Although I was saying I was surprised at the end how you could get yourself in and get affordable. So anyway, if you've ever wondered about it, I highly recommend. I will say that they announced as the week ended that they're already 80% sold for next year, next February. So it'd be lovely if I was there to see what that looked like. But ECP was great to work with. Their people are in and just giving and going. And wow, JT, the cruise director who was emceeing a lot of things. I don't know. He was like Superman. I don't know how he those guys, gals, they just on adrenaline, and they all really, really enjoy it, and the fans appreciate it. And I have to say, some of the Paramount people that I know were there, and they're there to help with quality control or just take notes and make suggestions and be on hand if something is needed, either a little bit of, actors and agents, very rarely, and it's been 8 years now, but they're just there. And if there's logistics or any issues or questions, they're there. But they're also kind of checking the food, checking, Royal Caribbean or Caribbean as much as ECP. So it was interesting to see that. And one of them, we were talking very briefly, and one of them said, one of the things we're looking for, because there are no licensed conventions now, right? Not Creation, not Reed Pop. The only event that Paramount Licensing, or whatever it is called now, post-merger, whatever Paramount Global Star Trek has licensed as an event is just the cruise now. And one of the interesting comments I heard from one of their folks was, we're just trying to make sure that it stays cruise oriented and doesn't become just a convention on the water. Like, the unique things you can do at a cruise and nowhere else are stage friendly. Not that you don't have photo ops, and things like that, but, autograph sessions, but just so that the really unique aspects of having the unconventional voyage as it is don't slide into the easy stuff you can do anywhere, which is what they should be doing. I just had enough. I didn't know if I wanted to talk about the cruise or not, but it's always good to always, again, the meta to all this is just try. It's hard. We're human beings, but try not to slip into the ruts too easily, because, try not to let that deer in the headlights hit you at some point. It's always going to happen. It happens to all of us. Keeping your scanners open to what's going on with fandom, not just so much the shows, obviously, but the world around you and your fellow fans, and maybe fans who aren't your fellows yet. It's all a great challenge. And then you may not find yourself painted into a corner when it feels like all of a sudden the world changed and what happened here? And you're like, best laid plans. We all get surprised at times, but I try to watch out for that and advise everybody to do the same. So what I also advise everybody to do is to help me thank our Patreons. Yes. So thank you, Chuck A., James Kerwin, Diana Hopkins, Helbjörn Gunn Johnson, Lawrence Todd, Justin Weir, Mitch Keith, Andrew Jazimski, Justin Patton, Joshua Patton, sorry, Josh, Pranakasha Productions, Chris Jiggins, boy, you can tell who's a little rusty, huh? Keith Rombach, and Comedy Forecast. I really do appreciate you all. Hey, and our live wires, Jesse at Crusher Convo, Greg Winstrom, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Gary Williams, James Durovich, Dave Gregory, Dan Leckie, and Casey Shafsky. What is with me? Boy, I am a little rusty today. Can you tell? Well, whatever. I still appreciate everybody being a $5 or a $10 simple patreon.com. Trekland Live is the Patreon after the slash. It's the shout out. And I say it, I'm going to sit down by the end of the week and get everybody's last year's worth of Portal 47 vintage behind the scenes conversations from our Portal 47 guest night. Okay. I sneak mentioned the Trek Files. There is a new one up, of course. We're in the middle of season 13. David Benjamin Tomlinson, you know him better as Linus from Discovery, as well as several other roles on the shows. He had a cameo as an Andorian in Section 31. Did you see him? That's today's episode of the Trek Files. It's wherever you get your podcast, but thetrekfiles.com is the Memory Alpha page, where all of them are now by season catalog. You can scroll easily. And when you get there, each page has its own episode with a player, audio player, and the document of the week. And you've got all the Memory Alpha hot links back to whoever we're talking about, whatever we're talking about, and the guest, if the guest has a bio. That's awesome. And of course, again, if you want to join us at the 4:00 every other Monday, not next Monday, but the week after now, at 4 p.m. Pacific, just get that Roddenberry Patreon. You can channel in all their other all the mission logs, all the genealogy, all the other great Roddenberry podcasts and their audiences, if you fancy that, and get in on their live shows. And there's some other live events that have nothing to do with a Roddenberry podcast. Fans have just wanted to offer them. Some other some older shows that have smaller followings that people enjoy. You can check it all out. But I'd love to see you there sometime. Most of all, just love seeing you. Of course, we're still on the Facebook page and wherever you can catch your podcast, although we are the only podcast with paperwork. But the biggest surprise lately, I meant to mention this, last year was a slow year. I don't know why exactly. I thought we'd come back from COVID, pandemic, right? Slowdowns. But in just the last 4 or 5 days, I've had 4 or 5 queries for Trek tours, which is awesome. One in December even. Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know what turned a switch. I thought maybe it was people who had seen me, met me, heard about me for the first time on the tour. Nope. Not a single one of these 5 tour queries had anything to do with seeing me on the tour. So go figure. Who knows? But you can also, if you're coming to LA or want to come to LA and you have a spare day and you want to set up your own customized away mission, I'd love to sit down with you in advance and do that. That's what it's all about. Occasionally I have a group tour, but most of the time, those are personalized tours just for you or your +1 or your +2, or maybe your group of 8 even, and we get an SUV and take it on. That's the trekfiles.com, where you can catch all of that at larrynemecek.com, right? And that's where, I've got the socials. It's Larry Nemecek on Blue Sky too. It's Larry Nemecek's Trekland. On YouTube, please like and subscribe if you're here for the first time. And the other things, Insta and Facebook and Blue Sky, like Twitter, is just Larry Nemecek. And I don't know what's going to become of our socials. Instagram used to be pretty pictures, and now it's pretty disgusting at times. As bad as Twitter. But there you go. They're still useful depending on who's in your community. My communities are still pretty much Trekish, right? So I'm spared a lot of that. It's like going back to watching terrestrial TV and going, oh, that's a commercial. I'd forgot what they were like. Anyway, glad to see you and engage on any of those. And of course, portal47.net is your mini-con all year long, even as the world evolves. And I think everybody's stampeding over to hearing about the writers and all the behind folks. Apparently, there's a whole world that still has no clue. Or as we like to say, Portal is for all the Star Trek fans who have no idea how much Star Trek they have no idea about. Maybe I need to work on the Star Trek fans who don't even know they have no idea. Because apparently they're going places. And I was glad to share the space with them. I really, really was. So look, everybody, on both of my cautionary warnings, okay, take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Do all the things. And yes, there were folks, all stripes of things, getting sick coming off the cruise. And I'll alter this whatever fits your boat. I can say stay awoke, because we are living in weird times right now. And you got to know what's up and what's down, and not vice versa. This is no time to buddy up with Mr. Orwell as anything more than a book to read, okay? Hang in there. Stay woke. Check the sources. Because if you are watching later on YouTube, you can join us live at 1-ish Tuesdays Pacific, 4-ish Eastern time on any Tuesday. Watching us later, though, you can comment below. Trek well.